Welcome to a new episode of the Makdisi Street podcast. My name is Usama Makdisi, and I'm joined, as always, by my brothers, Seti here.
Hello.
And Karim.
Hi, everybody.
And special thanks to our producer, Sina Rahmani, who reminds me to tell all our listeners and viewers to please subscribe and give a 5-star review if and whenever you can on whatever platform you're listening to or watching this podcast. We started also, I want to remind all our viewers and listeners that we've started a Patreon recently, and we are in fact getting it up and running very soon. So
it's up. It is up.
It's up. So we're encouraging you to sign up. The link is in the episode description below. We have one tier for all the bonus content, but you're welcome to sign up for higher tiers if you are so inclined and want to help support this show. We're going to plan on posting bonus content as well as a Q&A, which we will involve our Patreon listeners and subscribers very soon. Today, however, I'd like to introduce our main guest. We're joined by Dr. Nadera Shalhoub-Kevorkian. Dr. Nadera is one of the most extremely distinguished Palestinian scholars that I'm aware of great international standing. Nadera is a professor and a chair of global law at Queen Mary University. She's at the cutting edge of critical work on feminism, on public health, on trauma as they relate to the ongoing Palestinian reality of constant dispossession, of brutalization, of violence, and yet also she focuses on how Palestinians also continue to resist Israeli colonization. Nadera really is a humanist among the dehumanized, a humanist in the face of dehumanizers. Her work includes dozens of essays and book chapters and articles and several hugely impactful books, including the most recent book of hers, which is entitled Incarcerated Childhood and the Politics of Unchilding, that was published by Cambridge University Press in 2019. Nadera has received awards and accolades from around the world. And in South Africa, she told me when I saw her here at Berkeley, she told me what the great Nelson Mandela told her in 1999 of an African proverb: "Until the lions have their historians, tales of the hunt shall always glorify the hunter." And because Nadera is a Palestinian lioness or lion working on the Palestinian experience in an extraordinarily unflinching and honest manner, she has, of course, been defamed and threatened, mostly by Israeli settlers who encroached on her home in East Jerusalem and who always harass her. So Nadera, welcome first and foremost to our podcast and to the Makdisi Street podcast. We're really happy and honored to have you with us today.
Thank you, Osama. Thank you, Sari.
And Karim as well. And we would love to just start, Nadera, obviously with the most basic and obvious question: how are you? How are you holding up in this moment of extraordinary evil and genocide? And just tell us how you are, please.
Well, as you know, we've never lived in an ongoing genocide, and it's hard to wake up in the morning. This is what I was trying to tell Karim. It's just hard to hold it and check the news, because every day I'm losing another kid I have interviewed, another colleague I have worked with, another student who had dreams, and this constant loss, the atrocities, the violence, the state violence, and the fact that it's not acknowledged is very, very, very heavy on my heart. And today was a tough day because I lost another close friend of mine. You know, every day is loss. So it's this, from one side you feel that we've never lived in such a tough, very tough situation. And unfortunately, as an academic, epistemic violence is hard at work as well. So it's not only the actual violence, state violence, the brutality, the lack of acknowledgement of the pain of Palestinians, but rather the fact that you go into an academic institution and you see epistemic violence, the production of violence that is produced in highly recognized academic settings and institutions. This is what also is agonizing. And of course, being in occupied East Jerusalem is not an easy thing to do at all. You know, just coming back to be able to participate in this gathering of ours was not a joke, because there was an attack of Jewish settlers on the Armenian area, and all of a sudden I'm getting those text messages and WhatsApps, please come, join us, they're attacking. So it's this day-to-day living situation that are making life too heavy, really too heavy.
So Nadera, on that, and honestly, we're of course deeply affected, and sorry that you have to go through this and live through this, and you've been living through this, you know, for decades and decades. For our viewers and listeners, you live in the Armenian Quarter, correct, in Jerusalem. Can you tell us a little bit more about what life is like there, and how there's a genocide going on in Gaza, and all the attention today, obviously and understandably, is on the plight of the Palestinians in Gaza. But of course, there are Palestinians in Jerusalem, there are Palestinians inside Palestine, there are Palestinians in the West Bank. Can you tell us a little bit about what's the relationship between the experience you're going through in Jerusalem with what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank?
You know, I think that one of the ways to look at what goes on is that if they are attacking on one side, they do a million other things on the other side. So if they're killing, demolishing bombs, starving people, leaving babies to be decomposed in incubators in Gaza, what you see in Jerusalem or in the West Bank is surveillance, is militarization, is militarization of schools, is demolition. Like 2 or 3 days ago, I woke up like opening my Instagram or my Facebook, and all of a sudden I see my dentist, and he's like telling everybody they demolished my house. They don't. So it's Asawiye here, just by my house. So to see Dr. Nidal, and I know Dr. Nidal, who worked, you know, building his house bit by bit, working so hard, and all of a sudden the house is demolished. So what is happening in every single space, whether it's in Haifa, where they're arresting an artist because she wrote something, whether our students in different universities, in Palestinian students in Israeli universities that cannot open their mouth or say something because it might be considered against the state, whether university professors like me who signed a petition saying stop the genocide and calling for ceasefire, that made everybody go, you know, bizarre. Or even, you know, I can tell you that when was it? On Sunday, I learned about a child who was 14 years old who was shot and killed. He was allegedly accused of stabbing a soldier. They managed to shoot him, but he was not dead. But then a female soldier came point blank and shot him. And you see in the video his body just jumping, 36 kilos, 37 kilos, a kid. And I needed to go to the family to see a mother of 34-year-old, to see his brother, Hamoudi and Baha, and to listen to his father. And the request is to release his dead body from the Israeli refrigerators. You understand? These are issues. And then I come home and I tell them, okay, let's see how we can convince the Israelis. We're talking about a child. He's unchilded even when he's dead, even in the Israeli freezers. And the mother is telling me that her hands are very cold because she feels that he is cold and that he is calling from the freezers, you know, like, and think about his classmates, think about his school friends, think about his relatives, think about everybody. And like, for God's sake, return, free his dead body from your freezers. So of course, I was busy with the family. I needed to go to visit them. I needed to talk to the special rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, and write her and tell her, dear Francesca, please, you know, this is a 14-year-old kid. Can you please help me release him? Now, we know that it's after Gaza and after October 7th. I've done that before, and I was able to pressure the Israelis to release the dead body of Nassim Abu Rumi, who was also 14-year-old. And our only request was to return his body in a humane manner, that it's not very freeze, so that the mother can hug and the father can bury properly. And in this case,
Nadera, sorry. On
Yeah.
that point, I think many of our readers and listeners, in fact, I didn't know this till I talked to you about this. They won't know that when the Israelis, if you are able to persuade them to release a body, they always do it in such a way that the body is splayed out, all still we always imagine a body like in a morgue, with a sheet and stuff like that. That's not how they return the body bloody and muddy and dirty and frozen and in contorted and terrible shapes, right? It's part of this continuing abuse that you're talking about.
In the cases that I dealt with, and I'm talking about occupied East Jerusalem, actually in one case it was in Nablus, where the legs were in a certain condition that there was no possibility of burying the martyr. In one case that I personally was following up and dealt with, and we were 7 months in the courts trying to convince the court to release the body of Hassan Manasra, and Hassan was 15 years old. When they released the body, the father could not handle what he'd seen. I've written about it. I have an article called Persistent Faces, because the father came back telling me, Doctora, his mouth was open. He was talking. Maybe they closed the black bag while he was still alive. His eyes were tearing. He was crying. Maybe, and then the feeling of the father that there's something he failed in protecting his child, even in his death. And after 7 months of struggling with the Israeli police and court to release the body of Hassan, Abu Brahim, his father, came to, because they asked the father to recognize the body. And of course, after putting million conditions, only 23 or 33 people, you can't have your phones, you can't have this, you can't have that. Until we managed to reach there, he goes into the ambulance to see the body, and he sees Hassan's face in a way that he could not take him. And he said, no, this is not my son. And he returned the body back. Now, according to Islam, ikram al-mayyit dafnu. If you want to respect the dead, you need to bury them. So everybody was upset at the father. How dare you return the body after someone, like, you need to respect your son. But then when talking to the father and listening to his narration, and his narrative is what usually my compass is people's narratives. I don't look at laws. I don't look at, this is as a person who works in the criminalities of the states, and basically in criminalities in spaces of death. This is where you see that the penology, the punishment is not only of the living, the punishment is of the dead. So in the last case, 3 days ago, talking to the parents and asking, this is why I asked Francesca Albanese, who's a UN rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories, can you please help me release Wadia's body? Because his parents are requesting this, and because they need to give him the proper barrier, because this is a child, and a child that is dead in the freezers. There's no need. And this, I call it in my writing, necropenology. It's penalizing the dead, but it's actually penalizing the family, penalizing his classmates. And it's increasing this feeling of being oppressed and dominated. So this is Jerusalem. While in Gaza, you see genocide. You here see what I call in my writing, ihali. It's the attack from all sides. It's the attack even over the dead body of Wadia Alayan. And Wadia, mind you, is the third in one family. They're cousins. His Baha'i Alayan was his cousin. Ahmad was a month before Wadia was shot and killed. And now Wadia, 14-year-old. So you wonder how much a family can handle. And I went to the family, I was looking at the faces, and I know those faces. Every funeral, I end up seeing the same faces. So this is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is packed with agonies, and it's, I don't know how to put it, but it's on so many levels. You know, you just shared with the people that I live in the old city. I live in the old city in the Armenian quarter. I live in Suq al-Husar, Armenian quarter. Of course, the name of my street was changed. It was Suq al-Husar, now it's Chabad Street. So of course, everything is being changed. But again, if when I go to get my grocery from the old city, talking to shop owners, that's another painful, very painful story. Yani, I can tell you one story that was it 2.5 weeks ago, when the neighbor was telling me, I need to talk to you about something. Come, يعني تعالي جارتنا, come, let's talk. Of course, they know that I write, I deal, I live, I observe. I'm constantly talking to the shop owners, and we sat in those short chairs, you know, in the old city, and he said, I need to tell you something I didn't tell my kids. تفضل احكي, tell me. And he's like, he couldn't speak. He started crying. And then he shared with me the fact that some settlers in the morning hours, while he came to open his shop, they pushed him down and they peed on his beard. Now, you're talking to a man who's 65, 70 years old. And, you know, telling me, a woman that writes about violence, sexual violence, but to see 3 settlers peeing on an old man in the old city on his beard, it's very, very, very painful. So this is what's happening in Jerusalem. So between Dr. Nidal, my dentist, that his house, that he ended up actually demolishing his house in his own hands, because if the Israelis will demolish his house, he must pay the money for the police that is coming, the soldiers that are participating, their breakfast, of course, and the bulldozers that are bulldozing the house, yeah. And my neighbor, the shop owner, with the agonies and with the cries of an old man, Abu Hassan with Hassan's dead body, and now Abu Wadia and Wadia that are hoping and waiting. And I'm running around asking, how can we handle? So it's heavy. It's heavy. Jerusalem is about Judaization, is about getting us out of the place. It's about not to see Palestinians. The formula is the less Palestinians, the better. So this is what you see in everything they're doing. It's taking over land, like in the Armenian quarter, and claiming it's theirs. So they call it developing, they call it developers or investors. These are settlers. It's settler colonial, and settler colonialism was done by law. So they're using the law. So in demolishing the house, it's the law. In taking over the land, it's the law. In withholding dead bodies, it's the law. So it's heavy. It's heavy. And this is Jerusalem.
Nadera, this is incredibly disturbing for all of us to hear, of course. But one of the striking things about the Israeli settler colonial project, of course, now, most of the world's attention is, rightly on Gaza because the scale there is so enormous, right? But what you're telling us reminds us that it's when we're talking about the Israeli state and its appendages, like the settlers and so on, it's what we're dealing with is a kind of full spectrum. I mean, like from the large scale to the tiny, like the story of these horrible people urinating on a man's beard, for example. Like that's obviously it's horrible, but it's so, and they have such attention to the smallest details of malice and evil. And then, of course, the large scale, killing 100 people at a time in a single bomb in Gaza and that sort of thing. I don't think, I could be wrong. I'm sitting near a historian here, but I don't think that there has ever been in history a project of systematic evil on that encompasses everything from the large scale. I mean, there have been many genocides, unfortunately, in the past. Genocide in and of itself is not unique. Dispossession, colonial dispossession, ethnic cleansing, they've happened before. But there's something about the Israeli project that runs the spectrum from huge scale down to these tiny, 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 tiny. I mean, obviously, for the people concerned, they're not tiny, but on a human scale, they're tiny. You know, like this thing about the children's bodies, or the individual, the person has to destroy his own house to save the shekels that otherwise the state would charge him for demolition. Down to the personal level of, you know, you walking down the street. I've heard you tell me stories about your life in East Jerusalem at a very, very micrological personal level. So the Israeli assault on Palestinian life runs this spectrum from the minuscule to the large scale. And that's part of what makes it this unprecedented evil that I don't think that there's any other. I mean, I don't know of another example. There's human history has evil, but not in this kind of way.
But also Nadera, we're also in 2024.
Yeah,
I mean, we're talking about, it's the anachronism of what we're talking about. It's the shocking levels of anachronism of this colonial project that's unfolding before our eyes. So Nadera, maybe you could speak to this issue, and also this question, all your writing, Nadera, all your experience, all the invitations you've had around the world. And I'm wondering how, you know, maybe this is maybe not even an appropriate question, but how do you feel that in, since you talked about epistemic violence in academia, among people who've talked about settler colonialism, do you feel that there has been a response? Or, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just, these are different sets of questions. One is the anachronism and the full spectrum of Israeli colonialism and the violence that it inflicts on an extraordinary level and on a micro level constantly. There's the question of anachronism, and then there's a question of, these are several questions, so choose what you want. The question of how do you feel, you know, all the academic work that you've done and that we've done, especially you've done, do you feel that it has made that people actually understand this level of extraordinary violence, and what has the response been to you and that you've seen? These are different questions, I'm sorry, but what you're saying is so haunting, honestly, Nadera.
You know what? At this point, I don't see that the Israeli society is seeing us. Let me start there. You know, I'm sharing those day-to-day experiences to point that the mundane violence is very important. Yes, we probably do not count. And maybe, you know, we need to be dead bodies, but not even dead bodies, because we're still not counting as dead bodies, because Wadia is still in their Israeli freezers, yeah. But the mundane violence is what I'm pointing to. And it's in the everydayness where I start, where I work, where I write, yeah. It's the kids that are on their way to school that are being harassed, yeah, where boys are stopped and searched, and all of a sudden they're asking them to take off their socks, because then the rifle can be exactly in a penetratable manner, in a rapeable manner. So you see those scenes every morning, and you wonder, do you think that the kids are not comprehending? It's about power. It's about we are here, and you need to evaporate somehow. So the annihilation in Gaza is hard at work, and they don't care. They don't care. Every time, listen, just look at us when we were watching Gaza. In every single aspect of watching Gaza, we were saying, okay, they will stop. There is no way, you know, it's too much. Like in October, I lost a friend with her 3 kids. On October 17th, I woke up with this scene of the father holding the bags, plastic bags, screaming to everybody in Gaza, Ya nas, hadol wuladi. These are my kids. His kids' dead bodies were in the plastic. I was sure the world would stand and would say, no, we won't allow it to continue. That was in October 17th. And today we're in March, and it continues, and more atrocities. So number one, as a person who looks at the mundane, and I think it's very important to look what is happening to pregnant women, what is happening to babies, what is happening to men, the undressing, the humiliation, the new report that came yesterday of sexually abusing men, and it's by the UN, yes, in Gaza. These are things that we need to look at and to wonder, really, and I agree with Steri, to wonder which settler colonial entity that the issue is maybe it happened, but today everything is on camera. Everything is seeing. Everybody is seeing. Everybody is noticing things, and what I believe is that there are two main factors in looking at what is going on. Because once we said it's the biopolitics, okay, so it's about Judaizing all Palestine, okay. Then we said it's demography, they're afraid from us because we're a demographic threat. Then, my work in 2014, my book on security theology, surveillance, and the politics of fear, I said, it's fear, it's the effect of the history of the Zionists that are here, it's the security, and security became a theology. But if you add this security theology with the sacralized politics, which is God gave them the land, and then the amount of violence. Today, I'm not there or here. I'm not with I say, yes, there is security theology, there is sacralized politics, but there's another point that is really capturing me. I feel that, and I see as a criminologist, that we are ontologically non-being. The story is not only, it's not only about, humanity and human rights. No. All the world is seeing what is happening to Palestinians, but ontologically, we are non-being. There is no other way to accept life for mothers, for men, there's no way. Every power has a counterpower. People will continue resisting. Palestinians are resisting in every way. They were incarcerated, and with the mala'a, with the spoon, they managed to get out of the prison, yeah? People, it's not, this is the normal, like, think in psychoanalytical terms, think in criminological terms, think in any sociological theory. Every power has a counterpower, yeah? But what we are seeing, and this is the father with the 2 plastic bags, what was he saying? He was telling the world, when he's saying, Hadol Uladi, he is reclaiming what was ontologically not claimed as a being. This is how I see it. I see it that there is a major failure in the world's way of looking at. So this is why, if you'll ask me where I'm standing today, and it might sound crazy to some of you, but I'm writing about ashla. I'm writing about body bags, body parts, because in the history of slavery, you see scholars writing about the flesh, yeah? You see the work of Hortense Spiller in her article, Baba's Maybes, Papa's Maybes. You see the work of Wahelias when he's talking about Habeas Viscus. You see the work of last book of Jackson, Zakiya Jackson. But in Palestine, it's not good enough for me. It's somehow, Fanon wrote about the flesh. Today, I feel it's the ashla. It's the scattered body parts. It's the really, I am there because I am starting from that Gazan father's voice and his kids ashla, yeah, in the plastic bags, those scattered body pieces, in those sites of the intimate love to his children that became dead pieces of flesh, the overkilled by the settler state's machinery of dispossession, and that is continuing. And as a Palestinian feminist that is theorizing ashla, I'm really looking at this moment with this ongoing genocide. I can't think but through the Palestinian gathered, bagged, scattered, unfounded ashla, because ashla is untranslatable, yeah, in English, but it's those where the cut dead bodies means securitized and sacralized necessities to Israel, according to them, according to their logic, according to their policies, according to their imaginaries, where dead Palestinian bodies are like scattered in the wind on the ruins of demolished, flattened Gaza. And it's this ashla, to me, is where this is where, you know, the massacre, the flower massacre, where over 100 Palestinians were killed. Yes, 750 were injured, and then collected, reassembled the ashla by their loved ones. This is why, you know, when I think about it, and I feel, I argue today that ashla, the scattered, the cut body parts, indexes patterns of colonial atrocities, policies, genocide, that is refusing to accept the humanity ontologically of the Palestinian, yeah? Because when the father is saying "Wuladi hadol wuladi," yeah, he is reclaiming his fatherhood, although ashla in plastic bags, but he's maintaining the non-orphaning condition of his kids. You know, I've seen it مع دكتورة حنين الدايم, and Dr. Hanin also shared that her father, her uncle, her cousins, other members of her family were hit by a rocket, and they were turned ashla. And then she said, you know, I heard dogs, I heard cats eating my family members, and I was running after cats and dogs to collect the ashla, to bury them, to dignify the family. So what I see today in Palestine, I see that ontologically we're not counted, we're non-being. Epistemic violence is clear in media, in politicians, in academic writing. And I'm here like, what can I tell you? This is what I'm writing about. I'm writing about ashla. I'm thinking about ashla. I woke up in the morning and this is what I think about. I'm always worried that another loved ones, and I see the defiance of Palestinians, you know. Samar is 7 years old. Her father shared a video of her. She was holding her cat, and she was talking to her cat, telling her cat, "Uwak, don't you even dare eating me after I die. As a muted, if I'll die, don't eat my flesh." You understand what I see here? What I see is that the entire world failed Samar. So she's talking, maybe her Bissi, her cat, maybe she will hear her, because the world is not hearing Palestinian voices. Not in Jerusalem. For years I'm writing and I'm asking and I'm telling people, come see what's happening. Not in the West Bank. Look what's going on in Jenin. Look what's going on in Hebron. And definitely with the genocide in Gaza, with the amount of killing, with the annihilation, with the starvation.
Nadera, I mean, this is it's incredible, you know, to hear this, and it's emotional. But I wanted to ask you know, you were talking about the babies and all these dead babies. These images that I remember seeing, the image of I think it was a 5-month-old baby that the Jerusalem Post or somebody made a whole thing about. This was fake. It was a doll. If you remember that. And then on the other hand, there was the case of the so-called beheaded babies on October 7th that made it all the way to Biden's speech and to all the American press and everything. And so you have these very stark things, you know, all these babies and children being killed by the hundreds and by the thousands. And the image came as, oh no, this is a fake doll that wasn't even true. And so therefore, I mean, obviously, as you're saying, kind of negating not just, I mean, the very life, and the idea that these parents who are holding this baby and the grandparents that are holding this baby, because I think the parents were killed as well, their grief or whatever it is that they're feeling also gets negated in that. But on the other hand, it goes all the way up, even after it was proven to be fake, this business of the beheaded babies, it goes all the way up to the president, not once, but more than once, and in his speech of the 100 days. You know, you've talked about, obviously, your thing about unchilding. Can you explain that a bit more to our listeners, and the way in which these two babies have been represented?
Yeah. Well, let me start by the production of stories to justify violence. Number one, they don't need to just to produce stories, but they needed in this case to produce more stories of horror, to frame Palestinians as those, you know, savages. And don't misunderstand me, anybody. You know, my reaction to the stories on October 7th were horrified. I was talking to all my friends saying, not in my name. I will never allow anybody to touch a baby, to kidnap a child, to rape a woman. This is not in my name, and I will never accept it as a Palestinian, because all our lives we fought for the dignity, for life, for the wholeness of a human, and not the opposite. So not in my name, and nobody can do it in my name. Yeah. But the production of those stories to produce fear, to fear us more, to kill us more, to reach a space whereby not only killability, over killability. It's not enough to kill you. It's not enough to torture the flesh. You need to cut to pieces. You need to say, you know, Karim, if you see the posts of soldiers today there was a post by a soldier. You know, you feel so, you ask yourself, what is going on?
It's extraordinary.
What is going on? Like the way they talk about Palestinians, they said it, human animals, flatten Gaza. They said it openly. And lies over lies. And I don't believe any of them. I do not. It's very clear that they're lying. Yeah. It just feels so painful that no matter what we say, you can produce whatever you want in terms of evidence, proofs, documentations. And of course, what goes on today in Gaza is destroying all the evidence, is to destroy it. But, you know, since 1948, they were destroying everything. I grew up in Haifa. I was born in Haifa. And every time we passed by the graveyard of my teta, my grandma, there was a building, and my dad always told me, Baba, remember, this is where your grandma is buried. The fact that there is a big building and all of a sudden it's a nice area doesn't mean that she doesn't exist. So it's over our dead bodies. Yeah. But you know, in the case of babies, of course, all the world will listen to the Zionist entity. And Zionism was done with violence. Yeah. It was this Euro, you know, it's this Western violence that came here and all of a sudden is destroying everything, because we lived together. We had neighbors, Baba and Mama, my mom and dad in Shfamer and Haifa and so on, Jews, Muslims, Christians, they were together. It's not a problem of the indigenous Jews here. It's the problem of the Europeans that came with the Zionist project that is so violent, that the settler colonial, that is about the erasure. And the logic is totally different. It's about Judaizing everything, and all of a sudden the Bible is the answer. And mind you, you know, they're secular, but God gave them the land, yeah, which is, nothing has to make sense, nothing. So babies are used, and the issue, what I'm saying in unchilding, number one, unchilding came from the voices of Palestinians that kept on saying what our kids are not kids. So there is what I'm What I'm saying in my work as a critical childhood studies scholar is that children are a capital in the hands of the states. And in international relations, there's a scholar that writes Who's Afraid from Children, Helen Brookhurst. And who's afraid from children? Yes, they are afraid from our children because our children are the future, are the power, are the love, are the source of joy to us. You know, I'm a mama and I'm a grandma. They're everything. They're the apple of my eyes, my kids. And listen, I will fight everybody if someone will come that close to my kids. It's so normal, no? So the childhood is the capital in the hands of the state, and unchilding is like turning them into nobodies. Again, the element of ontology, and unchilding is really aligned with this operated along this twisted logic of necropolitics, whereby the present and historical realities of who had died in the past, who gets to live in the present, who is left to die now, is exactly where I go. So unchilding sheds the light on the effect of racial violence against the Palestinian, of settler colonialism against the Palestinian, and of course on the intimate lives of children. And what I say in my work on unchilding, and look at how when it came to their kids, they are hyper visibilized as children, babies that were attacked in October 7. When it came to our children and what is happening today, you see that unchilding is operated profoundly through the disruption of the global perception of childhood and of the intimate here that is embodied in a biopolitics. And it's so much visceral as well as global as we see it, because there is silence, there is negligence, there is lack of intervention, there's an inaction to the unchilded. So you have the wounding that everybody can see it. You know, if you talk to my colleague and friend, Dr. Hassan Abu Brahim from Gaza, and we worked together because I interviewed the kids that participated in the March of Return, and Hassan operated on them, yeah? Now, if you talk to him now, he explains clearly that a child who's wounded today with like an amputation, he needs 12 operations to be able to function as an adult. Do you understand? We're talking about 37 kids with amputations in Gaza today, and these are the counted, let alone other kind of injuries.
37,000, you mean?
37,000, yeah.
Yeah.
So 12 operations. Who would be able to fund those operations? Who will be able to fund those operations? So you ask those questions and you wonder, you know, I'm telling you, this is why I'm in the Ashla. I feel that we as Palestinians and as a Palestinian feminist today, when I see the humiliation and the emasculation of men in Gaza, putting them all in trucks. And you know, today Bennett was interviewed, and he said, "Oh, we interrogated 3,000 men, and they're still in Gaza. We're not bringing them to." You hear the amount. So they way have passed Abu Ghraib, and of course using dogs. Just listen to the testimonies, and using torture and causing major problems. So you wonder where are we going, and where is this world going?
Nadera, on that point, that what doesn't make any sense, I mean, to those of us who are outside of Palestine, is that this catalog of horror that's documented, that you see and that they talk about openly, and yet the narrative that is always, and Karim referred to this already with the Biden talking about the beheaded babies and the October 7th stories, about the babies and so on and so forth. What always comes out, and you have experience of this, how do you respond, or how do you deal with the fact that both Israelis and their supporters in the West constantly refer to themselves as victims in the face of this mountain of evidence that you also experience firsthand, and that you document and that you work with? I mean, I'm just something doesn't make any sense. Is it? And you know, you're also, you know, how do we make sense of that? How do you respond? And because you also live and interact with many of these people, do they not see what's going on, or do they not care? Is it denial? Is it something else? And then I want to get to the UN report. And Karim, I know, wants to ask you about the UN report.
I have a question too.
Okay. But so do you see what I'm saying? And Nadira, I mean, it's a catalog of horror that is so obvious to any person who has eyes to see and ears to hear. And yet the narrative here is that they are the victims.
In fact, Nader, actually, let me add to Osama's question. So the flip side of his question, in a way, so when you were describing the horror, right, and we've all seen these atrocious Israeli soldier videos, where they're laughing about what they're doing. I mean, for them, it seems to be a source of amusement that they can. We've seen, like, there's one where they show people urinating on the bodies of dead Palestinians, for example, right? And you had another similar story.
Parading in women's
underwear. The thing with the women's underwear, which there's a kind of, there's clearly, but the business with the destruction of bodies and this obsession that the Israelis have with bodies and with, as you say, holding children's bodies, long after they're dead, just to abuse families. There's something, and then the business with the ashla also. I mean, part of what's, in a very strange way, it's sort of like remember the beginning of Foucault's Discipline and Punish. Like it's like there's a really weird 18th century mentality there. The beginning of Foucault, where he talks about the Damien, the regicide, and how he was pulled in pieces. Like there's this thing about, now you're going to see the power of the king exercised on this body. The king can pull the body apart. The Israelis are doing something else like that, but of course it's with high-tech weaponry. And we're no longer in 1745 or whatever. We're in 2024. So there's a really weird way in which the Israelis seem to be living in a 17th and 18th century settler colonial mentality while using high tech and broadcasting this to the world. And then we have Osama's question about, but the West is sort of, mind you, it's the official, because I think the popular level of the West understands now. But the elite, the official level, is all about, oh, we must now see what happened again. Yet another recycled story about October 7th using the same worn out evidence that has zero credibility at this point also. Or Biden saying, as Karim said, I've seen the pictures of the 40 beheaded babies. Yeah, Habibi, you didn't see anything. There were no such babies and there were no photographs. But there's this incredible kind of attention to, let's talk about Israeli suffering and Israeli this and Israeli that, whereas this mountain of evidence that they themselves are recording on TikTok and YouTube and everywhere else, showing their exploits, there's a kind of, it's like we all feel sort of schizophrenic because there's these two different realities that seem to be incommensurate with one another. And sorry, that's a rambling question, but to go back to what Osama was saying too.
Listen, these are tough questions, but I must tell you, this is the ideology. It's not. I cannot argue with people feeling victims. I don't argue with emotions. If you feel afraid, if you feel a victim, if you feel whatever, I will respect it. But there's a clear policy here. Number one, they can argue that they're the victims, and they can cause the victimization and wounding and killing and continue because the global community is allowing them. It's not only because they're victims, because those that are around me that are working on victimology. I'm a victimologist. See, I started my career as a victimologist. But there is a clear policy, and the policy is mowing the lawn, flattening, Judaizing, getting rid of the Palestinians. If in 1948 it was with their politics of like, listen, my baba and mama, my dad and my mom were defined legally as infiltrators. My dad was shot and then he came back, and then he was shot and then my mom was hiding in a graveyard, and they caught her and they threw her back to southern Lebanon, and she managed to come back. So I don't know who is the victim here, and I'm not fighting over victimization. We're not victims. We're not victims. and we're not even survivors. We are defying and resisting this regime. But there is a clear necro-capitalist regime in Zionism. And this it's power, because they can punish, because they have the power of the word, not because they are powerful. No, not because they are powerful. And I think that we have seen that, yeah. But I kind of I'm looking at the situation in Jerusalem, in Gaza, in what goes on, and I see that that the world acceptance of the power of this place is what is giving them the power. So it is Foucault. It is what I see again, that it's a necro-capitalist settler colonial regime that is utilizing every power they are getting from different places to distort the minds of the world and of the colonized. Yeah, so they're like always running after us in a million ways. And that, that regime, that necro-capitalist regime is giving an impunity and immunity to the colonizer. So if you think about the ruins that we're seeing today in Gaza, I go to Fanon about the psychic ruins that are common usage in colonial violence. We've seen it all the time. Fanon argued that the damage to the person, to the psychic, to this but he insists on the ruins. I take it to a new place when I look at the Zionist policy. I take it to a new place. Why are they that busy with graveyards? Did you see how many graveyards were destroyed in Gaza? 17 graveyards in one shot. Why are they busy in universities? All the universities. Why are they shooting and extrajudicial killing of educators? Do you understand what will this do to our society? I was walking today back home and asking myself, how would I look at myself in 10 years when I'm asking myself, what was I doing during the genocide? What was I doing? Nadera, شو كنت تساوي during the genocide? This is where I'm thinking that they are the victims, that something bad happened in October 7th. I'm not saying no. That it was cruel, I'm not saying no. But what I'm seeing today in Gaza, after so many months, is not only cruelty, is not only brutality, is not only genocide. It's something that the world is accepting and is giving them the power to continue. Yeah. And it's mowing the lawn. They said it, they continue. Listen, if you go to Bennett, he had a plan. And the plan is being used. And I don't know, I don't know, like to think about graveyards is to think that this is what they want to see in Palestine. They want to see Ashla. And what I see is what we're doing is bringing those Ashla back to life by talking about it, writing about it, and telling everybody that is writing, yes, in slavery, in indigenous studies, in this, we talk about the flesh, we theorize about the flesh, but Palestine, and I, Nadera, as a criminologist, I'm putting at the center the scattered body parts, the body bags, and the dead bodies, the burned bodies. This is the center today. And if the world cannot see it, I don't know how can I keep the hope? Really, I don't.
Nadera, sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned earlier, I mean, you've been talking about power. And, on the one hand, you were talking about the very visible kind of annihilation, the assassination of journalists so they can't document what's going on, the assassination of all the educators, university people, school teachers, etc., so that nobody can learn. And going forward, that all the healthcare people, all the doctors, all of this kind of very systematic erasure and very systematic annihilation, so that when this infamous day after comes, there's nobody to kind of be there on the day after except for victims as they will be framed in the humanitarian world, right? There'll be, okay, send some aid, and maybe we give UNRWA, maybe we don't give UNRWA, maybe UNICEF comes in, maybe this NGO, maybe the Germans will send some money and food, and we'll feel grateful. The Americans will ship some more, the food or whatever, and this kind of thing. But on the other hand, I think if I heard you correctly, you also you said that they were not powerful. And I'm curious about that, because I'm in Lebanon now, and the way in which I think at least some people here and some of us perceive the Israelis is that they're not powerful. So they talk a big game. Yes, they can come and they can destroy Lebanon. They can destroy. They can hit. Okay. They're very good at that. I mean, we'll give them this. They're excellent at destroying from the air. But the sense of, after, let's say, the 2006 war here and then onwards, the sense of this Israeli machine was punctured. Psychologically, it was punctured. They went from, when we were young, oh, they're so incredible, and the Mossad, and everything was so scary, everything they do is so amazing, to the sense of, no, these people are defeatable. These people are weak in their way, and there's a lot of things that were dispelled. And here we are, 150 days into a genocide, and they still haven't, frankly, achieved their objectives. I mean, with all the genocide, with all this beyond belief damage and destruction, and people dying and being killed, and body parts, as you're saying, and children and babies, there's a sense of it's an expression of not being powerful at the same time. So could you explain a little bit more about that? Because I'm very curious.
Listen, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yes, they have power, and the power is coming not from them. They are not powerful. I'm convinced. And this is the discussion. I agree. Morning discussion in this place, with my better half. It's the morning discussion. They are not, because if I walk in the street and I speak Arabic, you will see them like this, ma'loom, and they should be afraid. And they should be afraid, because criminals are always afraid. They cannot dispossess my land. They cannot displace my people. They cannot kill and not be afraid. So they better be afraid. And this is why they are afraid, because they cannot look at us in our face. Listen, it's the power they have is the power that the global community is giving them. Morally, bankruptcy. Maybe once Israel had a moral base, not anymore. This war on Gaza have really, all the masks have fallen. And no, today also military, we know that they are not as strong as others.
Right.
And to me, and I've known that. I was always, this is the story of people that walk around the old city with me, and they always tell me, yeah, Nadera, you're not afraid. La, Habibi, why should I be afraid? The fact that they are carrying so many guns and so many rifles tells you it's an indication of their fear, not because they're afraid of me. No, not because they're afraid of me. I'll give you one example. If you go to an area here in Jerusalem, and you see a high number of children arrested. There's child arrest is a topic I write about, and I cover, and a high rate. And then all of a sudden, the Israeli scholars are saying, you can listen, we need to discuss this because we're afraid from their stones and throwing, and they're, no. Habibi, leave the place. The kid won't throw a stone. The stone is telling you, I refuse to accept humiliation as part of my daily life. I refuse to see my teacher being humiliated. So read it differently. What I'm asking us to do is to think otherwise, to think from us here, from what we experience, from the mundane, from the daily, from the act of Aboud in Ghazi, who is saying, who was talking about the Khubbezi. And his analysis, the Khubbezi stood with Palestinians more than the Arab countries, because the Khubbezi, he can eat it and that, while the Arab countries are not standing with them. But the problem is today to go and gather Khubbezi you need to go to the border, so you might be killed for the Khubbezi. So Aboud is talking about the Khubbezi. I think that power is, what can I tell you? Power is corruption, extreme power, corrupt extremely. Israel is given lots of power. And the article that was published this week, New York Times, by an Israeli leftist, Grossman, about what goes on. I'm like, I flipped in my chair. I'm like, if he can't see us or hear or understand the over 75 years of agonies, and then the New York Times is producing it and giving him a stage where others cannot, because I want to write about Ashla. I really want to stage Ashla and our scattered dead bodies in plastic bags that are being reassembled to create life and to create the wholeness of Palestinians. And no, they cannot change anything. The fact that they have power, they have no power. The father with the plastic bags is telling, no, these are Hadol Uladi. And Hadol Uladi is a statement that the wholeness of Palestine cannot be scattered to Ashla. The opposite. So yes, I might sound to you a bit not logical, but you know, in rationality doesn't work in colonial contexts.
Nadera, on that, I mean, you are logical, of course, and it is you're giving incredible testimony and witness. But and the answer you gave to the question of when I asked you about when the oppressors constantly talk of themselves as victims, and you said I want to push back a little bit on this point, and you said that you can't argue correctly. One can't argue with feelings. People feel something. It's true. You can't say they don't feel it. They do feel it. But on the other hand, how do you I mean, beyond saying you acknowledge feelings, but isn't the whole point of their narrative of being victims precisely what enables the refusal to accept Palestinian humanity, the refusal to accept the 75 years that precedes October 7th, the refusal to accept the Palestinian wholeness, isn't it? So I don't understand when you say you can't argue with their feelings, but their discourse of victimization is precisely what then leads into this thing. So I'm just trying to understand. Explain to us.
Let me take you to some theorization and criminology on techniques of neutralization. But I'll start by saying culturally, this is what they sell. This is what they teach. This is what they educate. So not that they believe that they are victims, but this is how the curriculum at school. We are victims. If you look at the every feast and every single thing, it's about a war with someone because they are the victims. So it's this cultural repertoire that is really being repeated and repeated and repeated. So, and this is why when I teach Israeli students, I do not blame them or argue with their feelings, because this is what they were being fed all their lives. Contrary to this, you know, I was raised as a Palestinian woman. ارفعي راسك يا مرفوعة الراس. Keep your head up, with all the agonies and stories and daily hardships that we're facing. Yeah, راسي مرفوع, my head is raised up. This is how I was raised. So I think that it's also cultural. But let me take you to one of the theories in criminology and talks about techniques of neutralization when a criminal commits a crime. It's either I didn't do it, it was by mistake, they pushed me to do it. It's all those techniques of neutralization that they will continue using. But they are criminals. Let us stay there. Whatever they're saying to neutralize the effect of their crime, we can read it, we can analyze it. They want to say I'm the victim. They want to say I did not mean it. They want to say I was afraid. They can say whatever they want. This is one thing. The other thing is the amount of criminality and atrocities and brutality and necropolitics against Palestinians is non-negotiable. Everybody can see it, including Biden. Everyone can see it. So it's not that I'm arguing with their techniques of neutralization at all. They can continue using it. You know, you remind me of one of my colleagues who's like, he keeps on asking why, you know, why do I think I'm when I talk about Palestine that I'm like saying it in pride that, you know, I'm Palestinian, and his argument is that those Palestinians, those terrorists, those la habibi, we're not terrorists. We are not terrorists. You can't frame us in this Islamophobic mentality, racialized colonial mentality, because this is what colonialists have always done. Fanon told us that the colonizer perceives the colonized in zoological terms. Yeah. And this is why they put them in Bantustan, in spaces, and they're afraid. So in Haifa, we were all put in Wadi Nisnas to make sure that the Palestinian animalized others are kept in one place. But it doesn't mean, and they can stay as much as they want. They are the victims. And listen, again, I don't argue with what happened in the Holocaust. It's horrible, it's unacceptable, it's genocidal. It's something that I look at, I learn from. I look at books on testimonies from people who survived the Holocaust, and I have lots of, you know, respect to those witnessing. This is Palestine, by the way, but at the same time, these cultural beliefs that are, you know, sugar-coated with other stories, sometimes biblical, sometimes Netanyahu's analysis or the Ben-Gvir's analysis. We need to look at them as criminals, and we need to analyze them from a criminal perspective. This is how I see it as Nadera. And it's not dehumanizing them at all. It's just realizing we are dealing with vicious criminals, and they should really, somebody should stop them. And to me, if you ask me today, the only way is a global political movement that will stop them. Economic, I don't know what. I'm not a politician, but I feel that this is where we should go.
Nadera, I wanted to ask, I think I want to get to the October 7th reports, but before that, I have one last question, which is, you know, you've been talking about the ashla and the body parts that you have expressed so vividly in this sense. But I mean, politically, the ashla, you know, Oslo created this in the political body of Palestine through the PLO, through this division, through the West Bank and Gaza, and Area A and Area B and Area C, and I don't know what all these, the Armenian quarter, you know, all these different things within Jerusalem. It's all divided. It's all, you know, political body parts, let's say. And so the question, you know, okay, colonialism, settler colonialism, genocidal, racial hierarchy, all this stuff. But where is the Palestinian Authority? Where is the PLO? Where are those? I don't mean people, but the authorities, the political bodies that at least I don't hear much, and maybe they are, but I don't see a voice. I don't see a Mahmoud Abbas. I don't see these people coming out on a daily basis and saying something. So where are they? And what about the Arab Islamic world? Egypt, Gulf, the rest of the Islamic world? Where are they in all of this?
Listen, you're talking to me, and you'll never hear me defending Mahmoud Abbas or I think that they're not doing enough. I think that they are doing a major damage, really major damage. I want them out. I really want, this is, if you'll ask me, I've done that a million times. I've written letters, I've written petitions, I've only lately I signed a letter asking for the reform of the PLO. I think we're not doing enough. I think that the Palestinian Authority is functioning like, if you'll ask me, like baladiye, like municipality. It's good to collect the trash and to offer police services and to make sure that the streets are okay. But the problem is that it's creating a major damage to us Palestinians. And with the leadership that is not aware of the matrix of power, of the global matrix of power, they are wounding the already wounded Ashla. This is how I see it today. And I really think that, and I think that your point is well taken, that this is why I think about Ashla today, because I feel that centering the shattered flesh here that is maintained by the PA and by the way they function is a major problem, and it's our responsibility, yeah? Because I feel that here we need to push them towards thinking otherwise. Again, if we don't reform the PLO today, if we don't work against this onto-racial economy, if we don't work against the ashla, the continuous ashla, because it is يعني not only يعني Jerusalem. Come look at Jerusalem. يعني it's a catastrophe what goes on. Look at the West Bank and think about a simple case of somebody, a woman that is calling the police in Area C. The Palestinian police needs to get the approval of the Israeli police to be able to come help a woman who is abused in Area C. It's, in houses here in Al-Walaji, the bathroom is in Area B and the house is and the bedroom is in. This is the situation, and this is the PA, and they are responsible. They put us in this situation, and the settler colonial regime is working on ashla, geographical ashla, of course. And it's, يعني, I might sound a bit, but my feminist analysis, it's so sexual, it's so gendered, that really dispersal, that dismemberment, it's part of the uprooting. Our work is to reassemble the dismembered, exactly like the father with the plastic bags. He claimed again, هدول ولادي. These are my kids. So yes, Area A, Area B, Area C, Jerusalem, occupied Jerusalem, Hart al-Arman, Hart al-Nasara, Gaza. These are ولادي. This is watani. This is my space. This is my nation. We need to put it together. And yes, Palestinians in refugee camps in Jordan, in Syria, in Lebanon. This is all, it's part of the ashla. It's part of this is why all I see is I know I'm over emphasizing and centering the ashla, but to be honest, politically I'm there, criminologically I'm there, and psychoanalytically I'm there, because there is no way you can deal with such a wound without, number one, acknowledging that there is ashla here. There is uprooting. There is dismemberment. There is no other way. So it's Judaization. It's Israelization. But the question remains why the world is allowing this. And this is really my question.
Nadera, the ashla, just to follow up on this thing, the Arab Islamic world. It's also part of the Arab Islamic world.
Well, Arab Islamic world is a big failure. I just told you about Aboud in Gaza, who said that, yeah, of course. Yeah, you think that it's easy to know today that, I don't want to give more examples about the failure of the Arab countries. I always say, I'm a very proud Palestinian. I don't want to be called Arab. Because like when you think about it and you think about the failure, you think about the people that are dying, on the border in Egypt. You think about the fact that the Arab countries are normalizing and having relationship, and the only planes that are leaving from Ben Gurion is Arab aircraft. This is like madness. This is insanity. And this is major. It's additional wounding to the already scattered flesh of the Palestinian.
But Nadera, there are Palestinians. There are Palestinians, Yemeni, there are Lebanese, Yemenis, Iraqis. I mean, there are a lot of Arabs, of course. I mean, we're proud to be Arab. I mean, I know you are as well, obviously, but no. I mean, you mean Arab state? You mean official Arab states?
I'm talking about the Arab states and not the Arab people.
Okay, just
because
to be clear.
The moment I step into the love, it's the states and not the people, because the Arab people are. I know their heart is in Palestine. The problem is the leadership, exactly like the PA's leadership. Exactly like the PA's leadership, and you ask a million questions, and I understand. But then when I look at for example, Bassam Zumlot in the UK, and the amazing work he's doing there to try to bring together and to raise and to discuss the Palestinian issue, and he is part of the PA. So you ask your question, why and what is going on? So we need really to also do some internal work, and but at this point we need to stop the genocide immediately, and to think it and to think about it not in previous terms, but really in centering the shattered flesh of the Palestinian, because this is where it allows me to develop a praxis of being against the interracial non-being, because again, theoretically, I'm thinking about Membi's work, where he talks about, the language, the culture, the idea, the flesh that is that doesn't mean anything in specific places. And when you look at us here in Palestine, and you look at Gaza, and you look at Dr. Ghassan standing there trying, shell-shocked, to explain among the ashla with all the doctors in the hospital, you wonder, the people are defying, are resisting, are speaking back. Samar is talking to her cat just to say, don't eat my ashla. So I don't know when would the world wake up and tell this Zionist movement. And yes, it's time to abolish Zionism. This is where I'm going today. Just abolish Zionism. Well, it can't continue. It cannot. It's criminal. It's criminal. Only by abolishing Zionism we can continue. This is what I see.
Nadera, I want to ask maybe a final question, which is on this report that came out on the October 7th report that the UN just put out on the question of the rape and the sexual violence. Now, I want to ask you as a Palestinian feminist who's there. There's been a lot of criticism of this report, and the fact that it still, as far as I know, still relies almost entirely on Israeli official sources, with almost no actual eyewitnesses. And yet, of course, if one were to express this kind of thing, to say that on social media or anything else, one is open to attack for being against women and against, So how do you read that, and how do you compare that to the absolute silence of all the other reports and all the rigorously documented reports on sexual violence, let alone violence, sexual violence towards Palestinian men and women, and girls and boys?
Well, it's very telling. The way I read it as shaming the state of Israel, because they're using women's bodies, women's sexuality, and women's intimate life to play with it in political terms. Now, if rapes, abuses, sexual abuses, gang rapes, it always happened in war times. It always happened. We know of my book on militarization and violence against women covers this topic. And we know that the state of Israel 1948, there is a report, for example, in Nirin, exactly that specific place where October 7th started, there was a case of a Bedouin woman, a Bedouin young girl that was not only, there is documentation that I managed to get from the archive whereby Ben Gurion learned about the case, and the captain, the military officer, asked the soldiers, "What do you want to do with the Bedouin woman? Do you want us to kill her, or do you want us to rape her?" And the answer was litfokota, to fuck her. This is something that I've written about, and in my book on unchilding, it opens up the chapter on the Naqab area. Abuses and sexual abuses happen, and it shouldn't happen. And I will never approve it, not to Israelis, nor to Palestinians, and not in my name. The reports sometimes can get testimonies, some other times cannot get testimonies. The issue is that, is Israel allowing proper collection of evidence? Plus, personally, as a feminist, I don't go and interrogate rape victims. If a woman said she was raped, I will believe her. I do not need evidence, and I don't want to go check facts, to be honest. This is my opinion. The issue is that even that we don't see women coming out and saying what happened. So women's bodies are being used as political weapons. If it happened not in my name, if it didn't happen, it's shame on the state to use women's bodies and sexuality to promote political agendas, to promote further dispossession of land, to promote further killing, to promote abuse and rape, and keep in mind that the rapeability of the Palestinian based on the Zionist agenda is hard at work in so many ways. And I've, again, have written about that. And the state crime that is sexualized and genderized is there. So we need to, number one, remember, this is a very dishonest to say the state, they will use everything to further kill. It's a killing machine, and it's a political regime that can survive only on the erasure of Palestinians, and only when they will stop this and they will acknowledge what they're doing, we can start talking, but not to criminals. Criminals should be punished at this point. So I don't know what to tell you else about, when I look at the pictures, at the photos of soldiers today getting into Palestinian homes, using the lingerie, playing with it, and laughing and putting it on tanks and putting it on rifles. What is it? What is this if it's not sexual abuse? When you see the way they're treating men, undressing them, keeping them with nothing, using that, what is it if it's not sexual abuse? So using dogs, exactly like what happened in Abu Ghraib, the body of the Palestinian, the living body, the dead body, the cut to pieces body, are all capital in the hands of this Zionist entity. And of course, they will use any lie. They started with babies, they continued with rape, they will continue with million other lies every day with another story. We stopped believing them. I hope that the world will stop believing them. And if things like this happen, not in my name, I will never approve it.
Nadera, thank you. And I think we're going to wrap now. I mean, we've taken up your time, in this extraordinary moment for you and for all Palestinians. I guess the last question we want to ask as a way of wrapping is given what you've been saying, that the entire world has not listened and has not yet listened and refuses to listen to Palestinians, given the overwhelming mountain of evidence, our question to you is, why do you continue to write? Why do you continue to speak, and for whom?
Wait, sorry, can I just to add? No, I know, yeah. But just to add, because it's an important question, but you just said it too. I want to just say, it's not that the world is not listening. The world is listening. I mean, Aaron Bushnell last week set himself on fire outside the Zionist embassy in Washington. People are protesting across the entire world. Ordinary people are listening, and they're doing what ordinary people can do. It's the states. It's the I don't want to use epithets here. It's the awful Western states, above all, America, right?
No,
But
I mean,
with its European entails as well. But I mean, so it's not. I would say it's not the world isn't doing.
well, Nadera earlier said
No,
that
but
the world was
I
not
would say that
listening.
in response to Nadera too.
Yeah.
People are responding. People are doing incredible things in the US and in Europe, and of course across the Arab world and the third world too. It's these shitty states that are not doing the right thing.
We have to.
Yeah.
Nadera, the last word is yours.
Yeah, well, I think that, yes, effective solidarity that comes, from the streets of London, of New York, of Los Angeles, of India, of million places in the world is very, 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 very important. And this is the only way we can affect and change the matrix of power. But I continue to write, Osama, because this is Palestine, Habibi. This is Palestine. Palestine, I told kids in Silwan the other day, they kept on saying, everybody is dying, everybody is dying. And we gathered and I asked them to draw. And then I asked mother to bake something. And I asked father to tell the stories. And we were together. And then when they said death, I said, no. We're here. We're crying, we're screaming, we're laughing, we're drawing, we're hugging, we're talking, we're gathering. This is life. And we continue to live. And I write because it's life. I speak because it's life. It's love, it's collectivity, it's togetherness. This is what keeps me moving. And there is so much love in Palestine with all the hardships. And love is a practice of freedom. I hope that one day we will be able to be free. And yeah, what can I tell you? Free Palestine is what I hope to see. And I continue to write and I continue to speak because this is what I know how to do well. And I believe in our strength and our power and our togetherness and our hugging and kissing and thinking together. And I also believe in the effective solidarity around the world, because that effective solidarity, these voices that are coming from all around the world, whether from South Africa, that is really opened my heart, and just to see the case in the ICJ is just amazing. It's so important. This is what gave us some hope and futurity. So I want to believe in this hope and in us, talking and speaking and writing and thinking together and loving each other. That's what I see in Palestine.
So Nadera, thank you with that message of love and hope. Thank you so much for your time and honestly for all your witness and for all the work that you do on the ground in Palestine, for Palestinians first and foremost, but also for all of humanity in a sense. So thank you so much.
يعطيك العافية.
يعطيك العافية.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nadera.
Okay, guys, that was an extraordinary session with Nadera. Her testimony was extraordinary. The details, the unbelievable levels of cruelty that she documents, and yet at the end, her extraordinary ability to maintain a sense of defiance, of hope, and as she ended with love. And so, what did the two of you make of it, Karim? What did you think?
Yeah, I agree. I thought her testimonies were unbelievable. I mean, incredibly moving, incredibly difficult to digest. I mean, still, it's very, very difficult to digest all these kinds of stories. And the ashlat, the body parts, moving from talking about, babies and children and kids and unchilding and all of these theoretical and practical things that she deals with, individually and collectively. And now, moving to this business of body parts or ashlat, it's incredibly moving. And I very much kind of liked what she was talking about in framing all of this. Despite all of this, I was expecting her to say, yeah, we're victims. And then she comes and says, no, despite all this, I hate the idea of talking about victimhood. We're not victims. And, the idea of power and this notion of different nuances of what power is. And I had agreed with her there, and I really believe very strongly that I see the Israelis as not powerful. They're powerful militarily, with American support. Politically, they can blow up places, they can kill people. Yeah, sure, they can do all this. But fundamentally, they're a kind of a cowardly, group of thugs. That's how so, and I love the
You
idea.
mean the state and its
The
apparatus.
state, the state and its apparatus and its soldiers, its
army.
army, and everybody who supports them. It's just they're and she said it, this idea of what she's not afraid. She goes, and it reminded me of remember in 2000, in May 2000, when the South Lebanon was liberated, and everybody went down and started throwing those rocks across, and here we are sitting right there throwing rocks across, and the Israeli soldiers were sitting there in their bunkers, far away in their bunkers, and just like this, and scared and cowering behind, and you just had like kids and families and women and children just sitting there completely out there throwing stones. I mean, there was the sense of it's different ideas of power. I mean, and I love that she was able to kind of parse them out, even while she was talking about this incredible nuance and the testimonies. And I love the idea that she talked about love as the antidote to Zionism and the antidote to this violence and to the genocide. And if you remember Hassan Abu Brahim, who also was on an earlier episode of our podcast, also again with all the testimony and all the incredibly moving, depressing but moving kind of stories that he was talking about, and the solidarity that was being shown outside, he also ended up by saying there's the power of love, and that is the antidote. And so I thought, this is really incredible, and the importance of what you called about the affective solidarity from outside being very important to kind of sustain the work in the face of this inhumanity and the face of the kind of international political ineptitude, nothing going on, silence, although it's not really silence. The International Court of Justice, has moved. The South Africans have moved. The Namibians have moved. A lot of people have moved. It's just the key states, the Europeans, the Americans, or at least some Europeans, the Americans, and Arab states.
So, Sadi, on that note, I mean, maybe you want to jump in here in the wrap and speak to this point that Karim just raised, because when I was trying to conclude, you interrupted me. But that's okay. We're brothers. And you said that the world is not abandoning the Palestinians, that the world has spoken up. So do you want to say something about that?
I'm thinking about, Karim said also, obviously, when we all saw the South African, one of the most moving things about the South African presentation at the UN was that it was like, that's not us talking, like the South Africans, that incredible panoply of people that they had, black and white men and women from different backgrounds and so on, making these incredibly powerful presentations. It was like suddenly the world is we're hearing, in a way, the representatives of the rest of the world telling our story for us,
exactly.
Which is very, very powerful, and very moving. For the same reason, Aaron Bushnell, who set himself on fire in protest outside the Zionist embassy in Washington, that incredibly powerful. So the world is listening. It is this collection of Western racist states that are and as you're saying, both the Arab states sitting on their.
But it's also I mean, we should do an episode on this one day. It's not just Western. It's also the elite sort of classes of the apparatchik intellectuals, isn't it? Don't you think that? So it's not just the state. It's like there are a lot of people who could be saying a lot more and haven't said anything.
Yeah, but they never do.
That's true.
They never do. Like some of the major intellectuals in this country don't say anything about anything that matters.
I guess
they talk to themselves about themselves. But going back also to what Nadera was saying, the other thing I was going to say briefly is just that what she was saying reminds us of the scale in which the Israeli regime of death and destruction operates, which is this. It goes from the very, very small and fine grained to the absolutely apocalyptic and everything in between. And there is something to their mentality that is much, much closer to the 17th century in all kinds of ways than to the 21st. This state project is out of place in the 21st century.
But there's also, there's a point that it's out of place. You're absolutely right. There's an anachronism. We've been saying this for a while. This whole project is anachronistic. The settler colonialism in the 21st century in this form is totally anachronistic. The discourse of the Israelis, the fact that they themselves don't even hide. When they say these things, they say things openly. The torture of Palestinians, that's open. It's all videotaped. It's all recorded, not videotaped. Proudly, not proudly, but the soldiers parading in women's underwear, the stripping of men naked.
And the vast majority of, in all the polls, vast majority of Jewish Israelis supporting.
and
Yeah.
supporting this kind
So
of
it's
thing.
not just a fringe group. There's enough fringe
No,
groups.
but this is all this anachronism of this kind of state that is built on colonial violence.
And Western largesse. That's the other thing.
Yeah, but
in fairness to Western colonialists, I mean, in a way, like when the British and the French and the Americans did their thing, their awful criminality and so forth, they didn't have somebody else helping them do it. They did it themselves.
Yeah, but
the unique thing about the Israeli state is that they're endlessly coddled by the West.
Yeah,
they couldn't survive for 5 minutes without Western support, and yet they keep running roughshod over America, telling America to go, I have to be polite in this program, so I won't say what they say about America. But it's sort of like it's mockery in a way. It's just a weird contortionist. I don't know how to put it, but some weird amalgamation of the 17th century and the 12th century and the.
No, but there's also this point about the anachronism of the colonial project in Palestine in the 21st century and what we're seeing in terms of genocide. On the other hand, unlike previous genocides and unlike previous settler colonial formations, the idea of constantly insisting that they are the victims.
Yeah, that's true.
This is what I've never been able to.
It's a pathology.
This business of they're always the victims, no matter how much they document their own brutality. And I'm always reminded of Benny Morris, the racist Israeli historian, who said, yes, we're oppressing the Palestinians, but we are the greater potential victim here.
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
To me, that line, that's verbatim Benny Morris. It's astonishing. Anyway, Karim, thank you again. I know you're in Beirut, and you're as always with us from a distance. And Seti, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all soon, and we'll be getting to the Patreon. Karim, do you want to say just a word about the Patreon?
No, just to say, firstly, please send in any questions, not you guys, but anybody listening, anybody remaining who's listening, please send in questions, and so that we can kind of compile the questions and maybe do a session on that as part of the Patreon. And to be sure to please sign up for Patreon through the website. I think it's just patreon.com//MacDC Street. And otherwise,
it's in the link below. It's in the
link below as well.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.